Right, everyone. No. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. It takes a few seconds for Zoom to let everyone in, so we're going to wait a bit. There seems to be a rush at the door to get in here, and just give us. Oh, it's not even 1 o'clock yet. Well, now it is. We're just going to wait a few more seconds until everybody has joined. Wow, that's a lot of people. Usually it slows down at this point. Let's see if we can get started. All right, we're gonna start right now. So my name is Marcus from Hostaway. It's a pleasure having you here, and I'm gonna share a bit of background on what this webinar is about and why we're having it. So last Saturday, a friend of mine, he invited me over boating. We were supposed to transfer his sailboat from one harbor to another, and that was absolutely amazing. It was a beautiful day, sunny, until all of a sudden our mobile phones started going off. There was a severe thunderstorm warning. What I later found out was the worst storm in 20 years in Ontario. And we're both experienced sailors, but this was bad. This was really, really bad. And there was a moment when you realize that this is probably it. There's a chance we get out alive, and there's a fairly high chance we don't. And fortunately, that moment passed fairly quickly, as thunderstorms tend to do. Made it back to the harbor, and I realized what I have to do. I have to run home to my family, hug my wife and my kids. And the moment I got to do that, I told my wife, look, I realized that this is a new beginning now. I need to do things that I really enjoy doing. And the first thing I'm going to do is have another webinar with Airbnb, because it's absolutely one of the most fun things in the world. So I'm happy to see you all here, and I'm very happy to see anything at all, to be honest. And we have Julia here from Airbnb, who is going to share some very interesting data and interesting facts. But Julia, would you mind sharing a bit of background about yourself?
Hey, Marcus, thanks. I'm so happy to be here today. My name's Julia. I'm a market manager with Airbnb. I've been with Airbnb since 2014 and working specifically with professional hosts distributing properties to Airbnb since 2016. I've covered markets all across North America, from the Southwest Desert to the Carolinas, and now I'm covering Western Canada. I live in Portland, Oregon, and I'm curious if there's anyone on the call from Oregon. Would love to see if you're here in the chat.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Julia. Yeah, for all our attendees, whoa, there's really a lot of them. Please put a message in the chat. And Shannon, yes, you are muted, or if you're not muted, then you're awfully quiet. Now about this webinar, we're going to have a short presentation by Airbnb, but I want you to prepare your questions, because those of you who have joined Hostaway webinars before, you know, we are not going to be scared of the tough questions. I do have to say that Airbnb is a publicly traded companies. There are some limits on what they can and cannot say because they're publicly traded. But please type all your questions in the Q&A section. And to those of you who have something strange come up in the middle of the call, don't worry, this will be recorded. It will be available on YouTube, as are all our other webinars. And very nice to meet you, Jim from Kansas, the state. Love from Orlando, Florida. All right. Now, Julia, you have a specially prepared presentation just for us. Is that right?
Just for you guys, just for Hostaway.
All right. So if you share your screen, let's get started. And just a reminder to the audience, gather your questions and put them in the QA section on Zoom.
All right, so on today's agenda, we're going to cover travel trends that Airbnb has been seeing, product and policy updates, and then finally expanding your search eligibility on Airbnb. So let's jump right in. The pandemic has pushed us into what is probably the loneliest time in human history, and we believe that travel is the antidote. The pandemic has led all generations to experience a serious crisis of connection. People have been isolated on a scale never seen before and want to come together. We've seen a resurgence of travel to nearby destinations, smaller towns, and vacation rental markets, and you're all likely experiencing the resurgence yourselves. But as the pandemic has stretched on, we've noticed an even more systemic change in travel beyond just the shift to whole homes and non-urban markets. And for those who are able to work remotely, the longer the pandemic has lasted, the more working and living have blurred together, and the more permanent that this way of working and living has become. The travel recovery is what we believe actually a travel revolution. So propelled by the flexibility of remote work, travel is undergoing a fundamental change, and the world is never going back to the way that it was in 2019. The world has changed, and in 2022, people are traveling differently than they ever have before. Zoom and similar services are the latest technological innovation to disrupt travel, but unlike trains and planes and ships or cars and trains, Zoom and platforms like it have upended the entire case for travel. And in some cases, it ended the need for travel, like business travel. But with that, it enabled new ways for people to travel, like letting remote workers and their families live and travel anywhere. Employees are taking advantage of their newfound flexibility, setting up their office anywhere and everywhere that their Wi-Fi will allow, from the kitchen table at a neighborhood Airbnb to a bucket list beach across the globe. See a question.
Yeah, I could maybe add there just a reminder to our customers. What really matters in this time of day is that you distinguish between the long-term and the short-term trends. There's a lot of things going on right now in travel and also in the rest of the world that's non-travel related. Some of it is temporary and some of it is very, very long-term. And for those of you who distinguish the difference and take into account these long-term changes, you will be the winners.
Yeah, and I did just see a question come in from Amy wanting to know if this webinar will be relevant to Airbnb Plus properties. Yes, it is. There are a couple things that I cover that won't be, but most of the content in here is relevant to Plus properties as well as everyone else. All right. So another trend that has emerged out of the pandemic is travel flexibility. Our research shows an overwhelming desire for more flexibility in travel, whether that be when, where, or for how long. And after more than 2 years of disrupted trips and more accommodating cancellation policies that have emerged in 2020, there's also a practical desire to keep this flexibility in trip planning moving forward. So to respond to this, Airbnb built a new feature called I'm Flexible. It's a whole new way to search on Airbnb when guests are flexible about where or when they are searching, or where or when they're traveling. So in November of 2021, we expanded I'm Flexible with a date range of up to 12 months and nearly 30 categories of unique stays. And with the increased flexibility, we've seen users book homes in less popular places. So we're able to point demand to where there's supply. And it's not just all the usual destinations. In Q1 of 2022, our top 10 cities represented 8% of revenue, which is down from 12% in Q1 of 2019. So guests are diversifying their destinations and spreading host earnings more widely. Also, guests have used I'm Flexible over 2 billion times, and more than a third of people searching our platform have been flexible in terms of date or location of their stay. The tool was designed really to serve a world in which people have become untethered from the traditional office, and with remote and hybrid work here to stay, for some cases, travelers are no longer bound by weekend holidays or seasonal breaks. As many begin to make their summer travel plans with flexibility in mind, guests can leverage this tool and other features to book their next trip. But guests don't just want flexibility with regard to search. They want flexibility with regard to their stays. 77% of the US guests that we surveyed want the ability to change or cancel their bookings at the last minute. And over 2/3 of Airbnb listings on our site have a flexible or moderate cancellation policy. Another really exciting trend that we've seen is that travel length of stay patterns are changing dramatically. We're not just seeing long weekend trips anymore. And as I've talked about previously, as people work from home and can travel anytime, longer stays are really turning traveling into living. In fact, in Q1 of 2022, long-term stays, which are considered anything over 28 nights, remain Airbnb's fastest growing category by trip length. And then in the 12 months through September, more than 100,000 guests booked stays lasting 90 days or longer. And hosts are responding to the demand for longer stays. The percentage of active listings accepting stays of 28 nights or longer was over 90% at the end of Q4 2021. And they're also adopting weekly and monthly discounting in order to be better positioned to capture the demand for longer stays. And over the last 2 years, we've seen the average trip length increase by approximately 15%, with stays of more than 7 days now representing nearly half of all gross nights booked, and long-term stays of 28 nights or more accounted for 21% of gross nights booked in Q1, and that's up 13% compared to 2019. So looking ahead, we see strong sustained pent-up demand. In fact, at the end of April 2022, we had 30% more nights booked for the summer travel season than at this time in 2019. And the growth from 2019 is higher the further we look out into the year. So some really exciting trends. We also believe that people will continue to spread out to thousands of towns and cities, and they'll stay for weeks, months, or even longer. 100,000 towns and cities around the world have had an Airbnb booking during the pandemic, and 6,000 places had their first ever Airbnb booking. We continue to see the trend persist, with domestic and short distance travel remaining more popular in 2022 than in 2019. In Q1 of 2022, non-urban gross nights booked increased 80% compared to Q1 of 2019, while domestic gross nights booked also increased 65% compared to Q1 of 2019. And Airbnb guests have already planned stays in over 72,000 cities and towns just this summer alone. We also believe that more people will start living abroad and others will travel for the entire summer, and some will even give up their leases and become digital nomads. People want to explore new countries. Before the pandemic, international arrivals exploded from 25 million in 1950 to more than 1.4 billion in 2019. And really exciting news, gross nights booked for cross-border travel recovered to 2019 levels in Q1 of 2022. That's up from 33% of 2019 levels in Q1 of 2021 and 76% of 2019 levels in Q4 of 2021. So as more countries continue to reduce travel restrictions, we expect a continued recovery of cross-border travel to be a further tailwind for future results.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that about the international travel. Keep in mind there's a lot of, let's say, other type of restrictions that are going on right now. For example, airplane tickets in Europe are quite disrupted by the flow of people, but also many countries that I've heard from, people have had passports that have expired, and you can't go abroad without a passport. But surprise, surprise, it's you can't get a line. You can't even get in line to get your passport renewed. But despite that, we're seeing a big amount of travel internationally. So just remember that there's still other restrictions than COVID-related restrictions that are taking place right now. Once those are gone, then we'll see the floodgates truly open.
Yeah, that's a great point, Marcus. It looks like we have a question from Lisa. This new I'm flexible feature defaults to a 1-week stay. When it does this, it jumps to random weeks in January at my place, but I have other weeks available. Why is this a default set this way? Lisa, I'm not exactly sure. I'd be happy to look into this for you. I'll share an email address out at the end of the presentation. My guess is we're trying to point demand during slower seasons, or just kind of considering different types of seasonality or requests from the guest. But TBD, I would love to look into that a little bit more for you. So I'll send an email address your way at the end of the presentation and we can dig into that. All right. And then another trend that we believe will continue to persist is that cities and countries will compete to attract remote workers, and it will lead to a redistribution of where people travel and live. More countries are changing their visa and tax rules, and more than 3 dozen countries currently offer some sort of digital nomad visa program. And Airbnb is already helping a range of urban and rural destinations let remote workers try living there, from Chicago to Tucson, Arizona, Tulsa, Oklahoma, West Virginia, and Northern Maine. And the key takeaway from all of these trends really is that travel is changing, and the great news is that Airbnb is changing with it. We've released a number of updates to help you adapt to the new world of travel. So I want to jump into some of the product and policy updates that were designed to capitalize on these emerging trends by allowing our host to provide greater flexibility, accommodate remote work, and welcome even more guests. So let's start with pricing tools. We understand that setting your price is one of the hardest parts of hosting, and doing it right can really be the difference between getting a booking or not. Your nightly rate and any additional fees really need to strike a balance between covering your hosting costs and offering the very best value to your guests. And we're constantly seeking ways to give you greater flexibility and control over your pricing. So we introduced a few new pricing tools to help meet those needs. So the first update I want to share is our new pet fee, which enables you to welcome furry friends with confidence by helping you cover any additional cleaning costs or supply expenses that you expect to need to support their stay. This has been an incredibly popular request in the entire time that I've been working with hosts. It's probably been asked for, I don't know, hundreds of times. And so I'm really pleased to be able to say that we finally released it. And in addition to making trips smoother, we really hope that the change ultimately encourages more hosts to allow pets, which fundamentally improves and diversifies the inventory we have for guests to book. And being pet friendly makes your property more competitive on the platform as well. And then adding this pet fee means you no longer need to request one separately through the resolution center after you accept a booking, or have to chase guests down to who are slow to pay it. You can find pet fees and other pricing tools in your listing settings, but actually I'm going to kick it over to Marcus to kind of talk you through how it looks on the Hostaway side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have had for a long time the section for pet fees, and you can set them up there, and they'll synchronize to Airbnb. Sorry, Julia, you're muted.
Thank you, Marcus. I have a question here about hosts suffering a decline in bookings, you believe, from the categories functionality. You say the collapse started in mid-March, and you're looking for an explanation. So I'm curious to dig into that. I do know that March through May can be slower seasons for some of our hosts. We didn't release these updates until just a couple of weeks ago, May 11th. So if you started seeing this in mid-March, I think there's got to be another explanation here. But I'm, again, happy to dig into this with anyone who's experiencing that. Again, I'll share an email address at the end. Feel free to email. We can look into it with you.
Yeah, maybe we could get to the questions after the presentation, so it will be more interactive.
Sounds good. Okay, and then the other tool that I wanted to talk about today is our cleaning fee tool. We've heard many hosts saying that one fixed cleaning fee can make stays of 1 to 2 nights seem expensive. And we've heard the same from guests. So we launched a new short stay cleaning fee option that will give you the flexibility to charge a different fee for 1 to 2 night stays if you want to make your pricing more attractive. As a host, you're always in charge of your nightly price. You don't have to use the short stay cleaning fee, but you can if you want to. And if you do add this fixed fee to cover up cleaning costs after guest checkout, it's just a great way to make your pricing more attractive. It gives you the flexibility to customize your cleaning fee and really just be more compelling on the platform. So again, I believe that Hostaway has built to that feature, and you guys can...
Yeah, I could actually just give a quick note about all the features that you see here. When you are choosing a PMS, it's extremely important that you go with one that is a preferred partner of Airbnb. It doesn't guarantee that it has all the functionality, but if you read our reviews, you'll find out that Hostaway is known for always supporting as much functionality as we can in order to make the property managers successful. So if you don't have this functionality in your current PMS, please, well, you can go to hostaway.com and get a demo.
True salesman on the call. All right, so a policy update, one that I think will be pretty exciting to a lot of our hosts. So during the early stages of COVID-19, we worked to help accommodate the immediate needs of our community, and our extenuating circumstances policy allowed guests to receive a full refund if they canceled a booking because they were sick with COVID-19. We heard feedback from hosts that this approach led to an increase in unpredictability and last-minute cancellations. And this was especially painful for hosts during peak travel seasons. I know hosts I work with in Whistler felt the pain of that during the winter season, during the Omicron rise, and it just has an elevated impact during high season, especially. So now that COVID-19 is a known part of our world, many countries have moved to a new stage in their response, and we've updated our approach to COVID-19 related cancellations. For bookings made on or after May 31st, 2022, so next week, having COVID-19 will no longer be considered an extenuating circumstance. This excludes reservations, domestic reservations in South Korea and mainland China. I don't think we have many people on the call from those regions, but do just want to highlight that. And I think that's due to local laws. And if a guest cancels their booking because they're sick with COVID-19 outside of those two regions, the host cancellations policy will apply. And we hope this change allows hosts to feel more secure as they fill their calendars, especially ahead of peak season, and just know that we are listening to our host feedback, and this is important to us to develop a policy that supports our hosts as well. All right, so how do you increase your visibility on Airbnb? Why you're all here today? So first and foremost, let's talk about how Airbnb search works. Airbnb search algorithm uses a lot of factors. We call it the black box to determine the order of listings and search results. It's designed to help guests quickly find places that meet their needs. The algorithm's recommendations reflect what it has learned from millions of searches that have led to bookings in the past. The algorithm also takes into account specific details provided by the guests, such as desired destination, previous trips, saved listings. Not every factor is weighed equally, and you don't need to have a luxurious space or an unbeatable location for your listing to rank well. In terms of how to improve your search ranking, the key things in general to consider are enhancing your listing, pricing competitively, accepting more bookings, and working to become a superhost. So starting with number one, Airbnb's algorithm factors in how guests engage with your listing. When guests attempt to contact you from your listing page, and whether guests add your listing to their wish list, in order to help spark guest interest, feature a high quality cover photo that sets an inviting scene, describes the unique characteristics of your space, add accurate details that let guests know exactly what to expect, and offer amenities that guests want, such as high-speed Wi-Fi, free parking, a laptop-friendly working space, and pet-friendly properties. The next thing you're going to want to do is make sure that you're priced attractively. Airbnb's algorithm factors in your total price before taxes, so including any discounts or additional fees helps you to stay competitive. Setting this attractive price will help you improve your ranking because listings offering the best value in any given region tend to appear higher in search results. So we'll take a quick detour so I can talk to you about the most impactful merchandising promotions that you can offer. The first is weekly and monthly discounting. These discounts appear to guests looking for longer time ranges. The advantage is that you're generating nights and reducing the cost of cleaning and turnover. And then given the trends that we're seeing in length of stay, these pricing levers are well worth your consideration. And then the next offers a few options for both you and your guests. We call this tiered pricing, with the price point changing by 10% in exchange for a non-refundable cancellation policy. So you have the option to offer a non-refundable policy in addition to any of the other cancellation policies that you might be using. The guest actually sees a choice of both policies when they go to book, but the cheaper price point is for the non-refundable option. So another great way to potentially drive more conversion. And then the early bird discount is a really useful tool when you're trying to secure revenue and nights as far out as possible. You have the ability to tier a discount percentage based on a time range. For example, you could provide a 10% discount for guest booking 3 months in advance, or a steeper 15% discount for guest booking 5 months in advance. And I think with the last few years that we've seen, and lots of volatile booking trends, this is a really useful one for anyone looking to target people who are booking further in advance. And the benefit to you is gaining that baseline of bookings further in the future. And then lastly, but of course not least, last minute discounts, which are exactly what they sound like. But I'll add that these can be particularly useful to make up any lost bookings from cancellations. So everyone experiences cancellations, and I think it's really important to have a plan B in those cases, and last minute discounts can really help you fill those gaps. And then the next thing the Airbnb's algorithm factors in is your listings availability. So your response time to inquiries and how often you accept bookings. The more open dates you offer on your calendar, the more likely your listing will meet a guest search criteria and appear in search results. Other actions that you can take to improve your ranking are responding to requests within 24 hours, avoiding repeatedly declining booking requests, using instant book, and avoiding canceling bookings. The more flexibility a host offers around how long guests can stay, the more likely the listing will show up in search results. And then
I could maybe mention on the opening up your calendar. This is not only related to Airbnb, but this is something that's going on right now in the industry overall. There's been a lot of investments into different OTAs over the years, and of course Airbnb's competition has also been growing, and the focus has shifted. They used to focus on getting inventory, but that has changed dramatically, because it's not enough that a company like Airbnb has access to a property. They also need to have access to it on certain dates. For example, the dates that the guests want to book. Now, if that property is already booked someplace else, it doesn't matter that it's on Airbnb. If the guests want to book it in July and it's fully booked in July, then it's almost worthless, at least for those guests that want to book it in July. And this is something that's worth keeping in mind. And you have to set up, you might have to try different strategies with different properties. This is a lot easier if you have more properties, especially if they're similar. But see what happens if you take one property and advertise it with a different channel makeup compared to another one. It might have an impact.
Thanks, Marcus. And then finally, and just lastly, I mentioned this before, but being a superhost helps improve your ranking. So Airbnb's algorithm factors in whether you're a superhost, but if you're meeting some or all of the requirements to become one, that helps you as well. So for example, having your listing booked regularly and receiving positive guest ratings tends to help your listing rank higher. Guests also have the option to filter their search results to display properties offered by Superhost exclusively. So in general, providing excellent hospitality typically helps improve the performance of your listing over time. Okay, so now that we have a basic understanding of how Airbnb search works, let's discuss tips to ensure your listing is visible to as many guests as possible. All right, so when it comes to making sure your listings are visible, there are some factors that you as a host should consider. So the first of which is an activation delay. In order to give hosts time to double check settings, it takes between 6 and 24 hours from creating a new listing to it being visible in search results. So just keep that in mind when you push new properties through. And then secondly, consider your minimum and maximum night stay requirements. To show up in search where a guest has chosen dates, a listing must have a suitable number of minimum and maximum nights. So to appear in the minimum or in the maximum number of searches, it's recommended that you reduce the minimum night stay requirements as much as possible. And similarly, increase the maximum nights. So factor in long-term stay guests as well. Some Airbnb guests are looking for stays longer than 28 days. And in order for a listing to appear in these searches, it's necessary to set up a monthly discount on top of your base rate. And then my legal team really did want me to point out that there are certain cities in the US that have night caps, and it's important to note that hosts in those cities with nightcaps respect their respective nightcaps. So if you have one, maybe you'll need to set a maximum night stay requirement there. But then moving on to photos, this is a great way to attract more guests. It's the first thing that they see when they look at your listing and search. So your photos should showcase your space and help set your guest expectations before they book. Airbnb actually spoke with some photographers about how you as a host can make your listings and photos stand out. And I want to share some of those tips with you. So first, the listing cover photo. It's your hero photo. Really think about the experience and environment that you're trying to portray. The cover image is the first thing that a potential guest sees, and it's what may make them want to stop and see more. So you want that to be really compelling. And then additionally, listings with 16 or more photos are more likely to be booked on Airbnb, and they're associated with higher overall star ratings when compared to listings with fewer photos as well. So important to have as many photos as possible. Make sure that the living spaces are free of excess clutter and that you're photographing the property in the best natural light possible. You'll also want to make sure you're shooting at eye level. This helps to avoid any angle distortions. It ensures that the image is well balanced and allows viewers to see the space closer to how they would in person. And then sometimes listing photos will skew too much in one direction. So as an example, they might have too many detail shots, so you don't actually see what the space looks like. So find the right mix of wide, mid, and detail shots. The goal is to give the guest a clear picture of what the rooms look like, the flow of the home, as well as the elements that make your home special. And then highlight any unique amenities that you have. Guests love to stay in spaces with character, so call out the fireplace, call out the treehouse in the backyard, make sure that you're highlighting these special features that you have. And also remember, there's a whole culture around the place where you live, where you have these homes. So in the town, the neighborhood, not every image needs to be about your home. It can be the coffee shop up the street. It can be, pictures of the neighborhood, just things to give people a sense of what the area is like as well. And then lastly, it's important to curate and choose a range of images that best tell your story. So some questions to ask are, what will your guests love about this space? What surprises might they need to know about? How can you show the details, but still give an overall idea of what the room looks like? All of these are just really important questions to ask when you're considering the photographs that you choose to use to represent your space. And then moving on to amenities that guests are seeking most. So our internal data team measured the most frequently searched for amenities and found that these are the top 10 amenities that guests are seeking. So a pet-friendly space, Wi-Fi, free parking, a pool, a jacuzzi, kitchen, air conditioning, heating, washer, a TV or cable. I personally always look for washer and dryer when I'm traveling because I like to pack light and want to wash my clothes. It's always best practice to make sure that your amenities are entirely up to date. If you went through and created your listing and didn't check off a few of those amenities because they didn't seem like they mattered, go back and check and make sure that you've checked everything off. Or if you've updated the property, you've added an iron, you have added cooking basics, make sure it's there, because if you haven't selected that or checked that off in the listing, when people go to search, if they filter for it, your property isn't showing up. So you want to show up in as many searches as possible, make sure that those amenities are up to date. And then in today's day and age, with people working remotely or relocating, we basically just want to make sure that we're supporting remote work with our properties. And it's smart really to think about what guests might need to be comfortable when they're staying for a longer period of time or are working remotely. So fast and reliable Wi-Fi, laptop-friendly workspaces, good lighting, fully equipped kitchens, office supplies, just things to consider. And then finally, more guests are traveling with their whole families. So accommodating children and pets can make your listing more appealing to help parents and pet owners avoid lugging bulky items long distance. So you can highlight cribs or high chairs, a bathtub, air conditioning, washer, dryer, extra cleaning supplies, furniture covers, bowls for pet food, towels to wipe off paws at the door. These are all things that are going to help make your listing stand out in search results. And then with that, if I don't get to any questions that are in the QA, I do want to call out this email address, namer-webinars@airbnb.com. Go ahead and email us, and I'm happy to support you through your question and make sure that we get you an answer.
Thank you very much, Julia. Now, I saw there's a lot of discussion in the chat. To everyone attending, if you put a question in the chat, we won't see it because it's impossible to scroll through the whole thing. Please add it to the QA section. But I think me and Julia, we can take up one topic that was discussed a lot. A lot of people were saying that they have seen a drop off in bookings, or they can't find their listing in the search results on Airbnb, which may or may not be related. I can comment on the drop in bookings. Our data is showing the exact opposite. Actually, we're showing higher nightly rates and higher occupancy rates. And I even saw people in the chat saying exactly the same. They're booking more than ever at higher prices than ever. But I can completely understand if there's a drop in bookings, because back in March, what happened was the inflation suddenly was record high and the interest rates were increased. Now that means everyone who has future expenditure, let's say 5 years from now, you have a big birthday coming up, you would like to be able to afford to go to a restaurant and have dinner with your family, you need to start saving, because if inflation is going to go this high, you won't be able to do that. That changes any plans you have this year. Maybe you skip the restaurant this year and wait till you have a big birthday. But the same, of course, applies to all consumption. So consumption patterns across the globe change dramatically. Now, another thing, here's a test that you can do if you're a property manager. Imagine that you're a traveler and go out there and see what type of properties are available. We noticed, this is especially for popular destinations, places that were fully booked even 2 years ago. When you want to take a trip, what you want to do is have a good selection. Let's say you're going with your family and you're bringing the dog and you want to be on the beach. Now, when it's time to make the booking, what you want to see for the week that you chose or the month, you want to see at least 5 nice places so that you can compare. Now, if basically everything is rented out, which it is at the moment in most places, you might see one option. And that just means the guest is going to look elsewhere. Just like the trends here on the slide said, people are more flexible. They care less about where they're going. They just want a nice place. It means that people haven't set their minds to go into exactly that beach. And if there's only one place available, they might very quickly decide to choose a different beach instead. Maybe one where they can compare 5 beach houses next to each other and choose the nicest one. So that's at least what our data is showing, is that prices are up and occupancy is up. But of course, that's why bookings can go down, because if you have nothing, it's a bit like walking into an empty grocery store. You know, even if they have one chocolate bar, do you really want to buy the last one? What if all the good ones were cheaper and better? Maybe you just walk out and go to the store that's fully stocked instead. How about you, Julia? What do you think is going on?
Yeah, I think inflation could be a large part of it. I mean, I'm pretty limited with what I can share about our internal data, but I did mention that we do see a lot of bookings on the books for summer 2019 or summer 2022, up 30% from summer of 2019 at this time last year. And then we're seeing even stronger indicators future into the year. So I do think that there are some really exciting trends. That being said, you know, potentially with the rollout, there are some changes to what's happening in your search results, and we can definitely dig into that. But I do think that if you started seeing this in March, it's unrelated. But at the same time, worth looking into, and definitely happy to take the feedback and dig into this as well. I did see a few questions about pet fees, and I'll go ahead and just answer those. It looks like there's some questions about why the pet fee is set at as a flat rate, especially for long-term rentals. And then it's also for a single pet. So totally valid feedback. This is our first iteration of pet fees. I do expect this to change over time and evolve. This is feedback that I've heard from other professional hosts who are operating on the platform. We've made sure to bubble this up to our product team. I don't expect to change to this immediately, but I do think this is something that will add to our roadmap, and it's definitely important feedback. So thank you to Jacqueline and Ruth for asking some questions about the pet fees. Let's see.
All right. Yeah, let's see. There's 39 questions here. I don't think we'll get through all of them, but there's a question about Midwest USA and Heartland. I'm not an expert on Heartland at all.
Jim, I'm not either. I cover Western Canada, but I do know that we have, been seeing just a huge uptick in people heading to destinations that they'd never headed to before. And so I think it's highly likely that there has been some people heading that way, but this would maybe be something we need to take offline. So go ahead and email us and we'll see if I can get you that information.
Yeah. And there are also data companies that sell data on short-term rentals. You may want to Google it, Airbnb data report, for example, into Google, and you'll find a lot of companies that can provide some free data or even paid data that can help you find those location. I see here there's a question from Christopher that's feedback for our product team. Yeah, anything that's related to Hostaway support, please email support@hostaway.com.
And then I see a question. I'm in the UK. If the trend for increasing if there's a trend for increasing domestic travel, why is it that when I look as a guest, I only see overseas properties on the Airbnb homepage and not ones in the UK? I do think that the homepage right now is highlighting design and all the different categories. Once you type something into search, if I'm looking for somewhere, let's just say the Willamette Valley, because I'm based in Oregon and I want to get away for a weekend, all that will populate will be things located nearby. These are kind of just we're just highlighting some of the categories and the new launch. I think when I look at the page, it's some in the US, some in Bali. It's all over the world. So I think we're really just kind of highlighting the amazing categories we have on the platform globally.
About the search results, I know Airbnb can't say anything, but a common question that some of you are asking and that we're getting, and this is not only about Airbnb, this is about all the other OTAs as well, as how come my listing doesn't show up, or how come it shows up like this on the OTA. And one trick that I have seen work quite surprisingly many times is please make sure that you use an entirely different IP address and device, and that you're not logged in anywhere, because the data is quite advanced. There's a lot of data being pulled up, and of course, if you're looking for a stay in your hometown, and someone, let's just say, if I was Airbnb and I knew you had a property in your hometown, I wouldn't be recommending that to you, because that's one less chance to sell another property. And if you're tech savvy, you can of course set this up on your computer. It's fairly easy. You can use a VPN to change the IP address and incognito mode. But a super simple way is just get, when you meet a friend, ask for their cell phone and do the search there and see what happens. Or if you're at a friend's home and they have a computer, use that computer as long as they haven't logged into any of your services. That way you get much more realistic search results, because search results on search engines, but also OTAs, they're of course tailored to the audience. If someone is sitting in one city and is booking somewhere, you want to show them different results to someone sitting in a different city, depending on what the overall conversion rate is for that demographic. That's not about Airbnb, that's about just in general.
That's a great point, Marcus. I think too, I think I mentioned this during the presentation, but the results are personalized as well. So if I've booked 2-bedroom properties exclusively on the platform for the past 5 years, then I'm probably going to get a lot of stuff in my search results that are similar to that type of property. It looks like Maggie asked a question, or Airbnb canceled a reservation on me 3 days prior to a guest checking in and refunded them in full despite my firm cancellation policy. How is Airbnb able to do this? Any guest can say they have COVID without providing documentation. So 2 things. We do require that a guest provide documentation when they have to cancel due to a COVID positive test result. That being said, the policy is being deprecated as of May 31st. Any bookings made on or after May 31st, 2022 will not qualify for an extenuating circumstances cancellation policy if they test positive for COVID. So that will no longer be in effect, Maggie. Let's see.
All right. What about barbecue fee? Orlando, Florida is one of the areas that charges for this. I've been in this business a long time. I've never heard about a barbecue fee.
I don't know the barbecue fee.
I've heard about having to bring your own sheets and linens and for example, beach towels. Never heard about a barbecue fee. Gerardo, if you're a Hostaway customer, please send that feedback to support so that later on, when it's time to decide if we implement that, then we will have one more data point to support it. In the meanwhile, if Airbnb doesn't support it, I don't think they do, and if other OTAs don't support it, then there's not much point in adding it to Hostaway. One thing I can say though is that if you use Hostaway to build your own website, you can sell any fees you want. So if you do want a barbecue fee, you may not be able to get it on Airbnb, but you can get it on Hostaway.
Yeah, and then the other thing you can do is use the resolution center in the meantime. If there's not something that you can formally add there, is just reach out and let the guests know that you need to collect that fee if they plan to use the barbecue. I see a question from Carol. I have 3 properties that sleep more than 16 guests. The result on Airbnb is 16 guests. So both Airbnb and me as the host lose revenue for the additional guests. So Carol, as of right now, I don't think there is a remedy for this. We capped the guest caps out at 16 due to our party policy. This is something that comes up pretty frequently with some of our professional hosts. So definitely exploring some options here as to ways that we can work better with you guys. But because of this party policy, which is pretty important to our trust and safety team and the company as a whole, I don't have a remedy for you right now, unfortunately.
All right, I saw there was a few questions here regarding will all these new features with Airbnb be available to change in Hostaway? Yes, most of them are already there. Some of them are coming very soon, and some of them are coming a bit later. But you can always find that information by going to support.hostaway.com and just type in your question. How to add a pet fee in Airbnb, type pet fee Airbnb, and you'll get the first result there. And if there's something you can't find, email support@hostaway.com.
All right, and then I see a question from Lisa. Does your cancellation policy impact your visibility? I do believe that it is part of what the algorithm factors in. That being said, we just know that flexible and moderate cancellation policies do convert better on the platform. So definitely worth considering or testing on some of your properties, especially if they're not performing as well. That being said, I've worked with professional hosts for years. I know that that's not always possible for our hosts. So something to consider for maybe some properties where you have homeowners that are more flexible, or properties you want to test some things out on. But yeah, I do think it impacts it. I couldn't tell you how much, but there is probably an impact in conversion there.
Julia, I see 2 questions here regarding the new categories. I'm not sure if you're able to answer. For some reason, the QA section seems to scroll up and down by itself. Well, they're about how do you get on those categories? If you're not able to answer, I can try myself as well as a non-Airbnber, but
yeah. I can try as well. It's still new to me. I'm still getting familiar with the rollout, but I think our platform is looking at quite a few different things. So making sure that you're listed as a cabin. So when you created the listing, how did you set it up? Making sure that cabins in the title, or ski destinations in your it's in your description. Making sure that all that is there is one of the ways to make sure that you're getting featured on within those categories. And then as long as you are a true cabin close to a ski destination, I do think you should be showing up. And if you aren't, would love for you to reach out and we can troubleshoot that together as well.
Yeah, there were a lot of questions about the categories. When I read the Airbnb release, I thought it was automatically done by an algorithm by Airbnb. Is that?
Right.
Yeah.
That's correct. So that's why having all those words in your, in your description or your title is going to help make sure that the algorithm is capturing the property.
Yeah, so it's probably a bit similar to Google, where they incentivize you to put in the most relevant words and remove the words that are not relevant. So if there was a question about oceanfront, if you have oceanfront in your title, make sure you have it in the description and maybe in one of the pictures as well that shows the oceanfront view. And that gives you a higher probability. But just like Google, it's not an exact science. Sometimes when you search for something, you get the right answer, and sometimes you don't get any answer at all.
Yeah, that's a good point. Scott, how do you expect increased international travel to affect non-urban US bookings? So properties that might not attract international travelers. Do you think Americans will tend to travel abroad rather than book locally? I think our internal trends are really showing that people are going to continue to book locally, even as international travel does pick up. People have discovered small towns and rural places and destinations that they hadn't before. And people are, again, working remotely. So maybe they are planning an international trip and they won't be working, but while they're home, they want to get away for a few days because they're tired of being in their house. I do think that the trend we're seeing toward non-urban and domestic travel will continue to persist even as international travel picks up.
I completely agree with Julia on this one. And one more factor that we've seen that wasn't mentioned is that a lot of small towns and vacation destinations, there's people moving in there full time. This is true especially for towns that are mostly, let's say, seasonal cottages. People are moving in full time. Now, what that does to the supply, it lowers the supply. So that again means because the supply is lower and the demand is higher, the prices can go up. And that's a very interesting trend that we're seeing, especially in small towns. And yes, if consumers find out something new that they haven't tried before, then it's unlikely to change unless if they enjoyed the experience. So just because you can travel internationally doesn't mean that everyone will choose that instead of keep going back to the small towns that they enjoyed so much.
Yeah, good point. It looks like, Amy, during the booking process, is there a direct question that asks if there are pets, or is this something I need to ask for after the booking is received? So with the new user interface, with the new pet fee, when a guest goes to search on Airbnb and they put in, I'm bringing 2 guests and 1 kid, and they also have to add the number of pets there as well. And then your pet fee will auto-populate into the base rate in their search results. And the search results will only return pet-friendly properties as well. So you should be notified that they're bringing a pet with the booking. You won't have to reach out. Let's see.
There's a question here from Ruth about the new search engine on Airbnb. I'm not sure, Julie, if you're able to comment on that at all. The search results, they look differently than before. For example, it doesn't have a title, and I've seen quite a few discussions about the nightly rate. If you are able to share some of your views on how the new search engine and the search results look versus the old, that would be great.
Yeah, Ruth. I actually didn't know that was going to be a part of the rollout. I discovered that, I think, on May 11th as well. I don't know why it was changed. I do know that your listing title still exists and it's still important to the algorithm and making sure that your listings are showing up in all the appropriate categories. And it does show up, on the listing page. I think, yeah, I can't speak to exactly why that decision was made, but I'll look into it and definitely would love to get more information for you on that as well.
There's a pretty interesting question here by anonymous attendee that I don't think Airbnb can answer, but I can take a swing at it. I'm not sure. Does Airbnb reduce the placement? I mean, I guess that means, do properties get lower in the search engines that use channel managers like Hostaway? It's a really good question, and the answer is, of course, it depends. But I'd say like this, that if you were running a company like Airbnb or any of their competitors, would you invest millions into a partnership program that brings you more properties because they perform well, or would you invest those millions to bring in properties that are worse off? If it was my company, I would invest millions into bringing in properties that perform well. And if that's how things are being run, then most likely you'll find out that when that those properties perform better and not worse. Otherwise, it wouldn't make much sense to have any partners in the first place. I don't know, Julia, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like I said, I've worked with hosts for a long time. I can only speak anecdotally and from my personal experience, but hosts I work with show up on, page 1 and 2 of search results frequently. Again, the factors that we went over are really the strongest drivers for that. It's them being super hosts, it's them having competitive pricing and availability. All of those other factors are really what's driving them showing up in search. And they're all connected to some sort of channel manager or API software provider. So I don't anecdotally see that that's impacting people, unless, of course, there is a lack of availability or competitive pricing, things like that.
That's a very good point. Just like I said, if people want to book a place in July and you put it on Airbnb and it's not available in July, well, then you're not going to get bookings. It sounds quite simple, but that's just how the algorithm works. Christy had a fairly similar question about using a channel manager. Limited functionality on the Airbnb app. This is true. So when you use a channel manager with any OTA, not only Airbnb but others as well, you can use the channel manager or the PMS to adjust your availability, and you can use it to adjust your rates. Now, if, for example, Airbnb, when you connect, then they remove the functionality from the dashboard or the Airbnb app, and that's just to avoid confusion. Let's say you go in on Airbnb and you set the rate from 100 to 500 a night, and then later you go in on your PMS and you change it from 100 to 200. That would be very confusing, because then you would have two different prices. So instead, most OTAs, what they do when you connect is they allow you to adjust the prices only from one place, and that place is usually the PMS. Same thing, if you want to block a date, you can't do it on the Airbnb app if you're connected to a channel manager.
See, I see a question from Denise. Can you say more about how to create a title that is most effective? I covered this a little bit, but I do think making sure that you're kind of highlighting the features of the property. If it's waterfront, if it's ski in, ski out, if it has a great view or it has a hot tub, I think those are all things that are going to be compelling. I think oftentimes with property managers who are managing hundreds of properties in their inventory, it's hard to get creative. And so you'll often see, snow bunny number 14, and it's just, not as compelling. So I do think really highlighting what makes the property unique, great view, fireplace, close to town, whatever it is that makes that property special, take the extra effort, do that. I think, even if the title isn't showing up in search results, when the person who is looking, the potential guest, clicks on that page and they don't see that creativity there, I do think it's not as compelling. So do try and get creative with those. Looks like we've got about 2 more minutes. I'm trying to see if there's some other questions.
Yeah, there's a lot of duplicate questions that we answered, so I just click answer live and done. Gwen wanted to, okay.
Let's see. I see I have a resort. I need to charge a resort fee to cover all sort of extras. Where can I do this? Does Hostaway have that functionality, Marcus? Do you know?
Their resort fee? Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, so you should be able to do that on Hostaway, Lisa.
Maggie has a question here. I think this is a good one. When using Price Labs or a dynamic pricing platform, are the discounts, extra fees, minimum stay, etc., set in Airbnb, Guesty, or Price Labs? I find it honorable that you mentioned Guesty here, but the answer is, of course, you should set it on Price Labs, which should be updating it. But if you're using Guesty, what I would recommend, Maggie, is please go in on Hostaway.com and book a demo with your sales team. I'm sure you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Right.
Okay, I see a lot of questions here that are extremely specific and mostly about Airbnb. So I think that's, yeah, we're running out of time.
I do see one it'll take me just a second to answer. I can just take one last one. I see, how can we look at becoming a plus host? That currently isn't something that the program is currently closed right now. But once and if it reopens, we'll make sure that all of our API partners are notified so that they can let their hosts know as well.
Great question and great answer. Well, Julia, thank you very much for joining us. It was a pleasure
fun.
having you. That was a very quick hour and definitely worth it. It's thanks to all the participants for coming here. Once again, many of these questions that you asked here, please contact support@hostaway.com. And if you're not using Hostaway, go to hostaway.com and get a demo.
Yeah, and then again, you can email us at namer-webinars@airbnb.com if you have a question I wasn't able to get to today. Thanks so much for having me.
Great, thanks everyone.